Hi, this is Chris Hickman from Decision First. In this video, we're going to show the features of the Web Intelligence application as part of the SAP BusinessObjects BI suite. So what I'm going to do is jump straight into a demo system here, and I'll pull up the system, and I'm going to launch straight into Launchpad. We went through the introduction to the Launchpad in a previous video. You can also find that in this sequence of videos. So in the Launchpad here, we have our application drop down up top here where we can launch into our Web Intelligence application. We can also launch it from My Applications here on the right side. So I'm just going to click My Application. Inside of My Applications, I'm going to click Web Intelligence and just launch straight into Web Intelligence. Now we've got two different versions of viewers that we can use for Web Intelligence. We can either use the HTML version or the Java version. And in this case, I'm using the Java version. It's more fully featured, but it also requires the installation of the Java application. You can also use the HTML version that just provides you with a quick view. It's not quite as fully featured as the Java version, but still it allows you to view the report, analyze some of your data, refresh your data, and then save and export the data to external applications like Microsoft Excel. So inside of Web Intelligence, I'm going to click New, and we have several different data sources that we can use. No data source is new at BI4. No data source allows you to create a Webby report as sort of a template so that you can reuse the report later and then specify a data source at a later time so that you can build the look and feel of the report without associating any data or a data source. A universe is your traditional idea of a universe. We can use legacy UNV files. We can also use the new semantic layer UNX files. You can use BEX queries from your NetWeaver system. You can also use analysis views from SAP. So I'm going to click Universe and hit OK. So it's going to now bring up a listing of all of my universes. So here's a listing of all the universes I have access to. You can lock down this listing so that you can provide a very concise listing of universes for your users, but since I'm an administrator on this system, I have access to see everything. So I'm going to go down to eFashion. I'm going to pick version 125 and click Select. So now this is going to access that universe, and it's going to pop up a query panel. The query panel on the left side here shows us our objects that have been designed in our universe. Inside of each of the classes, or the folders, which are called classes in universe terminology, you can see different objects, and the blue color here, this denotes a dimension. If you open up the dimension here, you see it has a detail associated with it. We have predefined filters, and then we also have measures, so you can see the icon there for measures. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab year and drop it into my results objects. Now the results object window up top here, these are the objects that I'll be able to use inside of my report. So I'm going to go into the store class, and I'm going to pull out store name. I'm going to go into measures and pull out sales revenue and drop that in. So now we're telling the Web Intelligence application that we want it to go out to the database. Of course, we don't know where the database is, what type of database it is. All we know is we want year, we want store name, and we want sales revenue. You can also use the query filters here in the middle panel so that you can filter out your data from the database. So if you wanted to, say, filter out on state, I could drop state in here and tell it that the state, if the state is equal to, say, California, then what it'll do is it'll filter that data out by California, so I'll only see data by California. So, but in this case, I want everything to come back, so I'm going to remove that query filter by clicking it, dragging it, and dropping it back into my left side there. Now down here at the bottom, we have a data preview. I can hit refresh, and I can get a quick view of what that data is going to look like. So year, store name, and sales revenue will show up here in my data preview. So you'll notice that there's all of my store names, there's my sales revenue figures, and there are my years. So if I'm okay with how that looks, what I'm going to do now is go up to the top and hit Run Query. When I hit Run Query, now this will go off into the database on which this universe was developed, and it'll run the SQL statement that was built as part of that exercise that we just did. In the back end, there's something called derived SQL that's created in the language for the database on which that universe was built. So that SQL statement will be executed against that original database, and the data is brought back and held in memory. So you can see here that we now have by default, we have a block that gives us all three of our objects, our two dimensions and our measure, and then It drops those into a table for us. And then we have just a standard title. I'm going to change the title of this report to Sales Revenue by Year. We'll just do that and hit enter. So there we are, we've changed our name. And I want to drag some of these rows out so that we can see the data. We can do the same thing with the sales rev column. So now we've got that. If I wanted to show sales revenue aggregated by year, I can go over to my available objects on the left side, click year, and click sales revenue. I can drag that out and drop it in. So you can see here that now my sales revenue has been re-aggregated by individual years. So we can verify that because Web Intelligence is intelligent enough to know that it needs to look at the dimensions with which the measures are projected so that it can take that context and recalculate the numbers that make up the sales revenue column. So in this case, it's taken every single sales revenue record here and summed them all up so that we get the value just over $8 million. If in this block, if I wanted to prove that out, what I can do in this block is I can select the year and I can right click on that year and I've got a context menu that pops up. I've got the concept of breaks here. I can add a break on that year column. So now what it's done is it's taken that table and it's added a break. So basically it's taken each unique value of year and made it its own section. So now I have my section here for 2004. I have a footer for 2004. Now I can select my sales revenue column. I can go to analysis and I can hit sum. And that sum will put a grand total of the sales revenue for each individual year at the bottom of that column. Now cross-reference that value for 2004 with the value up here and you can see that it's correct. So if we scroll down to 2005, you'll see that that also has a summation, and we scroll down to 2006, we also have a summation. And then whenever you put in a break and you put a sum on a measure column, it's also going to give you a grand total. So now we've got our 15 million and 13 million values that correspond to 2005 and 2006. Now, if we wanted to represent this year in sales revenue as, say, a pie chart, it's pretty easy just to change this table into a pie chart rather than the traditional way of just dragging an empty pie chart out and dropping all of your values in. What I'm going to do is right click the table here and go to turn into, and you can see turn into. I have options that I can use to turn it into other objects. So I'm going to pick pie chart, and you'll notice that whenever this returns, it's going to format my pie chart according to year, and if I mouse over the individual pieces of the pie, it's taking my sales revenue and now it's giving me my individual percentage values broken down by year. I can click inside of the chart, right click and go to format chart, and I can go into title and give this a title. So I can first of all enable the title, and secondly I can call this sales rev by year. Okay, and click OK. So now that's going to show up my title in the chart. So now there we are. So now I've got a pretty nice looking report here, and it took me just a couple of minutes to build. So one other thing that we can do, we've got a lot of numbers here in this column. What if we wanted to look at the individual stores and we wanted to determine which store has a sales revenue value that's less than a specific threshold? So if we set that threshold at, say, $400,000, we wanted to determine what stores have a sales revenue less than $400,000. Well, we can go through each individual row and we can see, well, the Boston Newbury store has $238,000 in sales revenue, which is less than the $400,000 threshold. We can go through the rest of the records here and see, well, none of the rest do. And then we'd have to go down to 2005 and then 2006 and do the same thing. But a way to make that much easier is we can apply conditional formatting so that we can automatically see what values fall below a specific threshold or don't meet specific rules on a bigger scale, so that we can just very immediately go down and see which record matches that rule. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select my sales revenue column. Inside of the analysis tab, in the conditional sub tab, I'm going to create a new rule. And then this new rule, I'm going to call the rule, this is just an arbitrary name, sales rev less than, say, 400K. And so what I've got here, this is where I set up my rule. So I've got sales revenue is, instead of equal to, we'll say is less than the value 400,000. Just make sure this is correct. And it is. So less 400,000. And then down here it says if the above is true, then display the cell contents, and it's showing you a sample of what the cell contents is going to look like. I like to make it a little more noticeable. So I'm going to go into my text. I'm going to change it to bold italic. So you see now that we have it in bold italic. The size is the default size from the column, so I'm going to leave that there. And I'll click OK. So now it's updated our preview. And if I click OK now, look at what happens. It takes the values that match the condition and it highlights them. So you can see that the Boston Newbury store here is 238,000. So you don't have to go through cell by cell and do an explicit comparison. So now we can scroll down and you see, oh, in 2005, the same store actually decreased in sales down to 157,000. So that tells you that you need to do something about that store. But now in 2006, you see that no stores have sales revenues less than 400,000. So you can see that the Newbury store is actually up to 887,000. So on the analysis that you performed on the previous years and whatever changes that the analysis brought about, it obviously paid off, because now in the most recent year of 2006, you can see how the sales revenue figure really jumped from our values below 400,000 up to 887,000 in this case. So that's how you can do a quick analysis on this report. So we can go over to the report now that we've finished the report. I'm going to click Save here. And we can save the report here in your favorites. So in our Launchpad discussion, we talked about the difference between favorite folders and public folders. So favorite folders are accessible only by you and an administrator in the Central Management Console. We can save it off in the public folders that are accessible by anyone who has access to any of the folders. So here if I went into this folder, and you can see I've got a couple of other sales rev by years here. I'm going to call this sales revenue by year version 2 and click Save. So now it's saved that report, and you'll notice up top one of the new features at BI4 is we now have the concept of tabs inside of the Launchpad. I can go back to my documents. I can drill down into my favorites, into the public folders, go into CH, and you can see there's sales revenue by year V2. And again, I can, like we talked about in the Launchpad presentation, I can right click and pick view or modify if I wanted to change the report. I can also just go back into the tab here and just go straight to the report. So with that, you can also print the report. You can distribute the report. So you can send the report by email to a specific user. Inside of the BusinessObjects system, also to an FTP site. You can go into your data. You can export your data to a different location. You can change the data source. So you have a lot of different options for interacting with your data and pulling the data out of the system so that you can work with the data outside of the system. So in this case, I'm going to switch back over to my file. I'm going to click Save. I'm going to switch away from my data view back into my design. So there's my report. You have a couple of options for refreshing your data. You can hit the refresh button here. You can go into data and refresh the object, the query individually. You can also go down here to the bottom right corner and you can see how fresh the data is by mousing over the refresh button. You can also click the refresh button, see how long the last execution took, and then now you see that it was refreshed less than a minute ago. So now I've got the data refreshed. I'm going to click Save, and I'm going to close my report. So I've got I'm not going to block any traffic from Java. So now I'm back into my Launchpad, and I'm going to click Log Off. So this video has provided you with a quick overview of Web Intelligence and the ad hoc querying capabilities of the Web Intelligence system. So if you'd like to contact me, again, my name is Chris Hickman. My email address is chris.hickman@decisionfirst.com. You can find me on Twitter at @chickman72.